In the quiet hush of a rain-drenched evening, the world seemed to hold its breath. The sky, a tumult of dark clouds, wept silent tears, each drop a whisper against the brittle windowpanes. Inside, the air was thick with a weight that clung to her like a shroud, an unspoken storm churning within her chest. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, a relentless drum echoing the chaos of her soul. She sat alone, clutching her belly, feeling the faint, fragile flutter of life growing inside her, a fragile hope amid the wreckage of her dreams. The house was silent save for the distant rumble of thunder, mirroring the storm raging inside her. Every tear that traced a path down her face was a testament to the quiet despair she carried beneath her humble veneer. She was no stranger to hardship, but tonight, the darkness felt suffocating, as if the very shadows mourned with her. The world outside was relentless, indifferent to her pain, yet she clung to the faintest whisper of hope that somehow, dawn would break through this storm. Suddenly, a voice shattered the silence, harsh, unyielding, carrying the weight of a man who believed he could claim her future with a single word. "Child is mine," he said, cold and unfeeling, as if those words could erase her pain or rewrite her story. His declaration cut through the rain, slicing the fragile silence like a blade. The truth of those words hit her harder than the storm outside, an accusation, a challenge, a declaration of possession in the midst of her vulnerability. In that moment, the rain seemed to intensify, each drop pounding against the windows with the fury of 1,000 storms. Her tears blended with the rain, indistinguishable from the deluge outside, yet her heart was battered by more than just the weather. It was shattered by the betrayal, by the loss of her dignity, and by the cruel twist of fate that had turned her world upside down. The silence that followed was deafening, a void filled with unanswered questions and trembling hopes. But amidst the chaos, a quiet fire burned within her. A flicker of defiance, a whisper of resilience. The storm outside had not yet claimed her, and perhaps neither would the storm within. As the rain continued to fall, she closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the dawn that waits beyond the dark clouds, a promise of new beginnings, of strength rediscovered in the midst of despair. And so, in the silence that stretched between her sorrow and her hope, she made a silent vow that no matter how fierce the storm, she would stand tall. That her story was not yet written, and her spirit would not be subdued by words or accusations. For every tear, every heartbreak, was but a seed of resilience. And in the end, even the darkest storm gives way to the light, if only we hold on long enough to see it break through the clouds. She sat quietly in the corner of the dimly lit room, the shadows wrapping around her like an old, familiar cloak. Her hands rested gently over her belly, trembling slightly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile life within. The silence was thick, heavy with unspoken pain, an ache that seeped into her bones and lingered long after the tears had dried. Every breath she took felt shallow, each one a reminder of how much she had lost. Once, she had dreamed of a life filled with love and hope. Now, all she had was the hollow echo of those dreams shattering around her. Her face was marked by quiet despair, eyes swollen from nights spent staring into the darkness, searching for answers that refused to come. The world outside continued indifferent to her suffering, the days blending into one another, gray and unchanging. Her heart, battered and raw, seemed to carry the weight of the entire universe on its fragile shoulders. She had loved fiercely once, but now, love felt like a distant memory, a ghost that haunted her every thought. Rejection clung to her like a second skin, and the ache of loneliness seeped into her marrow. She was no stranger to hardship, but tonight, her vulnerability felt exposed, raw and undeniable. The pain of betrayal, the sting of judgment, the fear of losing everything, these wounds carved deep into her soul, making her feel small and insignificant in a world that had moved on without her. She wondered if anyone could understand her silent grief, if anyone could see the cracks beneath her gentle exterior. Her tears, though long dried, still haunted her cheeks, shimmering in the faint light as a silent testament to her suffering. The pregnancy was both a miracle and a curse, an undeniable truth she carried alone, with no one to share her burden. She felt like a fragile vessel, on the verge of breaking under the weight of her fears and heartbreak. Yet, amid the depths of her vulnerability, a flicker of quiet resilience shimmered faintly, an ember buried beneath ashes that refused to die. She knew she was not invincible, that her wounds would take time to heal, but she also knew she was still alive, still fighting to hold on to the hope that someday, the storm inside her would pass. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining a place beyond the pain, perhaps a dawn just beyond the horizon, where light would pierce through the darkness. Her breath was shallow, but her spirit, fragile as it was, refused to surrender entirely. Somewhere within her, the faint whisper of strength stirred, a whisper that, even in her brokenness, she was more than her scars. She was a woman who loved, who suffered, who endured, and who, despite everything, still carried the promise of new life. And in that quiet, tender space, she silently vowed to herself, no matter how dark the night, the dawn would come, and with it, a new beginning. On a quiet afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the worn cobblestones, a figure appeared at her door. He was not the sort of person who drew immediate attention, either handsome nor particularly notable, just a man with rough hands and a face carved by years of hard work. His clothes were simple, slightly faded, but his eyes held a quiet sincerity that didn't ask for much. He carried a small basket, not overflowing, but enough to suggest that he had stopped by out of simple kindness, not obligation. She noticed him from the corner of her eye, hesitant to meet his gaze. Her hands instinctively moved to her belly, shielding the fragile life within. She had learned long ago to hide her vulnerability beneath a modest exterior, to keep her pain tucked away from prying eyes. But the man, unaware of her internal storm, simply stood there for a moment, silent and patient. "I saw you from across the street," he said softly, voice gravelly yet gentle. "Thought I'd bring you some bread. Nothing much, just a little to eat. Sometimes, a kind word and a warm meal are all that's needed to remind us we're not alone." His words were simple, unassuming, nothing grand or heroic. Yet something in the way he spoke, the genuine concern behind his eyes, made her pause. She looked down at her trembling hands, then back at him, uncertain. The world had taught her to expect harshness, to brace herself for disappointment, but this man's quiet act of kindness felt like a fragile thread of hope. She hesitated, her lips trembling, unsure if she should accept. The loneliness pressed heavily on her, the ache of rejection still sharp in her chest. But as he extended the basket, she saw not pity but a small, human gesture, an acknowledgement of her pain, a simple recognition that she was still here, still fighting. "I thank you," she managed, voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of gratitude and doubt. She wondered, fleetingly, if anyone could see beyond her humble exterior to the woman she was beneath, scarred but still standing. He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, then took a step back. "Take care of yourself. And that little one inside you. Sometimes, the smallest acts carry the greatest weight. Remember that." As he turned to leave, she watched him walk away, the quiet rustle of his footsteps fading into the distance. The sun sank lower, bathing her world in a soft, golden hue, an unspoken promise that even in the darkest moments, kindness, no matter how small, could linger like a gentle breeze, stirring the embers of hope within her battered heart. She looked down at the basket, the warm scent of bread rising from it, filling the stillness with a quiet comfort. She realized that perhaps, amid the chaos and pain, there was still room for gentle acts, small, imperfect, human acts, that could, in time, help her find her footing again. And as the evening air grew cooler, she silently wondered if this quiet stranger's kindness was just a beginning, a whisper that she was not alone in this fragile, uncertain journey. Over the following days, her world remained a fragile landscape of quiet moments and tentative steps. The man from across the street, whose name she learned was Jacob, continued to appear, not with grand declarations, but through small, unassuming acts that gradually chipped away at her isolation. He would leave a loaf of bread on her doorstep in the early morning, the aroma faint but comforting, like a gentle reminder that kindness still existed outside her pain. Sometimes he'd carry a bundle of firewood, not to burden her, but just to ensure she wouldn't have to face the cold alone. Each act was simple, a shared smile, a silent offering of presence, and yet, over time, they began to weave a fragile thread of connection in her otherwise solitary life. One chilly afternoon, she was sitting on the worn bench outside her house, her hands resting protectively on her belly, when Jacob approached with a slightly crooked umbrella. The sky threatened rain, dark clouds gathering like an impending storm. Without a word, he offered her the umbrella, a small gesture that felt like a quiet shelter from her storm of worries. She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she took it, feeling the weight of unspoken gratitude. As they walked together, side by side, her steps felt steadier, less like she was walking alone through a shadowed forest and more like she was finding her way out of it. He didn't ask questions or press for details, simply matching her pace, sometimes offering a word of quiet comfort. "It's going to be all right." Or, "The rain will pass." Each phrase was like a drop of warmth in her cold, trembling world. Once, he spotted her struggling with a heavy bundle of laundry, and gently helped carry it to her small backyard. She was surprised at how natural his actions felt, neither intrusive nor condescending, just a simple act of human kindness that shifted something inside her. She caught herself watching him often, wondering if these small gestures were enough to peel away the layers of loneliness she carried like armor. Their conversations grew slowly, almost like the gentle unfolding of a delicate flower. She would offer him a cup of tea from her modest kitchen, and in return, he shared stories of his own struggles, failed crops, missed opportunities, a life marked by quiet sacrifices. She listened, realizing that beneath the veneer of wealth and outward strength, he too carried scars, imperfections that made him human, just like her. Her guarded heart, once hardened by betrayal and rejection, began to soften, each small act building a fragile bridge of trust. One evening, as she sat on the doorstep wrapped in a patched shawl, Jacob pulled out a worn blanket, spreading it over her shoulders. It was an insignificant gesture, but to her, it was a silent promise. Someone saw her, acknowledged her pain, and offered her warmth, not because she asked, but simply because she existed. That night, her thoughts drifted to the stars peeking through the thinning clouds, tiny pinpricks of light piercing the darkness, reminders that even in the bleakest moments, light could be found in the smallest acts of kindness. Yet, beneath the gentle calm, unseen tensions simmered. Rumors whispered of her pregnancy, and the shadows of her husband's accusations crept closer. The truth of her life was fragile, like a glass fragile and easily shattered. The kindness from Jacob was a soft shield, a fleeting peace in a storm that threatened to engulf her. She wondered how long the quiet sanctuary could hold before the external chaos tore through the fragile peace they shared. As the wind picked up, rustling the leaves around her, she looked out into the approaching night. The stars shimmered faintly, whispering promises of hope and resilience. She knew that these small gestures, simple as they were, had begun to break the silence that had long held her captive. Maybe, just maybe, they would be enough to guide her through the darkness, towards a dawn she could still believe in. The days grew heavier with whispers that spread like wildfire through the narrow lanes and bustling market stalls. What began as quiet murmurs soon evolved into pointed stares and hushed conversations that followed her like shadows. Her modest home, once a sanctuary of fragile peace, now felt exposed and vulnerable beneath the weight of community judgment. Every glance, every whisper, felt like a stone cast into her already fragile spirit, threatening to shatter her resolve. The gossip was relentless, an unspoken chorus of suspicion and condemnation that questioned her integrity, her worth, and her very right to carry her child in peace. The neighbors' eyes bore into her like icy blades, and the rumors about her pregnancy grew louder, more invasive, as if her pain was an open wound for all to see. Her own family, once distant but at least familiar, now seemed torn between loyalty to tradition and their own shame. Her mother, her sister, those who had once offered quiet support, began to retreat, their faces etched with worry and disappointment. Her husband's family, wealthy and influential, wielded their power like a club, branding her as a fallen woman, unworthy of dignity or respect. They called for her to leave her modest home, to vanish from the community that once regarded her with kindness. The local council and village elders, swayed by the whispers of scandal, threatened to strip her of her rights, to cast her out into the cold, unwelcoming streets. She clung to her small sanctuary, her hands clutching her belly as if holding on to the last shred of hope. But each day, the external storm grew fiercer, threatening to drown her in a tide of shame and rejection. The outside world seemed to conspire against her, turning her pain into public spectacle. The gentle acts of kindness she'd once received faded into whispers of pity, or worse, contempt. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if her scars were now open wounds for all to see, her dignity battered by the relentless force of external judgment. The worst came one evening when a group of villagers, emboldened by gossip and falsehoods, gathered outside her home, their voices rising in a chorus of accusations. Some demanded she leave, others questioned her honor, and a few even suggested she was unfit to be a mother, an unthinkable insult that pierced her like a dagger. Her stomach clenched with fear, her breath shallow with mounting panic. The whispers morphed into shouts, and in that moment, her fragile world trembled on the brink of collapse. Amidst the chaos, Jacob was there, his presence steady but powerless against the storm of external hostility. He stood silently, his face etched with concern, eyes searching hers for some sign of hope. She saw the conflict flickering in his gaze, his loyalty, tested and strained by the relentless tide of community judgment. He was not a hero immune to the outside world's cruelty, but he was there, a quiet anchor in her turbulent storm. She looked at him, trembling, her voice caught in her throat. The crowd's noise was deafening now, a cacophony of accusations and shame. Her heart pounded so fiercely she feared it might burst from her chest. In that moment, she understood the true weight of her vulnerability, not just her own, but the fragile trust they had begun to build. The outside world was threatening to tear her apart, to shatter her hopes of acceptance and peace. Yet, amidst the chaos, she saw a flicker of something else, an ember of loyalty, a silent vow that he would stay, that he would not abandon her to the storm. As night settled over her humble home, the stars above flickered faintly, distant witnesses to her suffering and resilience. She knew that the external obstacle was immense, that the judgment of others could crush her if she let it. But she also realized that the strength of her bond with Jacob, fragile as it was, remained her only hope, her quiet rebellion against the storm that threatened to engulf her. The dawn was still distant, but beneath the weight of external darkness, a small, unwavering light burned, an unspoken promise that love and loyalty could still find a way through the fiercest night. In the midst of the chaos that threatened to pull her apart, Jacob remained rooted, a quiet presence that refused to waver. He was there when the whispers turned into shouts, when the villagers gathered in their suspicion and condemnation. He stood just outside her small home, his shoulders steady, eyes fixed on her in an unspoken promise of loyalty. His hands were rough but gentle, resting by his sides, never reaching out, simply existing alongside her, offering silent support that needed no words. When the crowd's voices reached a fever pitch, he did not confront or argue. Instead, he simply stayed, a silent sentinel, a calm anchor amid the storm of accusations. Sometimes he would shift his weight, adjusting his stance, as if to say without speech, "I am here." It was a quiet, human act, one of patience, of unwavering presence, that carried more weight than any grand declaration. He would often stand in the shadows, watching her from a distance, giving her space to process her pain while ensuring she was never truly alone. When she sat on the worn wooden steps outside her home, clutching her belly as if drawing strength from within, Jacob would quietly approach, his footsteps soft on the dirt. He wouldn't speak at first, just sit beside her, sharing the silence that was heavy but not empty. His presence was a steady heartbeat, a reminder that she was not forgotten, that her suffering was seen and acknowledged in a way that words could never fully capture. At times he would walk with her through the narrow lanes, careful to remain close enough to be a shield against the prying eyes and gossip, yet respectful enough to give her space to breathe. As they moved slowly together, he listened, not just with his ears, but with his entire being, absorbing her fears, her quiet hopes, her moments of despair. He was there as a witness, a confidant who understood that loyalty was not a grand act but a series of small, human gestures, standing in silence, offering a steady glance, sharing the weight of her burden without attempting to carry it for her. Despite the external obstacles, Jacob's unwavering presence became a subtle yet powerful force. He did not attempt to shield her from the reality of her circumstances or pretend everything was fine. Instead, he demonstrated his support by simply being there, steadfast, human, real. When she would look at him, her eyes often shimmering with unshed tears, she could see in his expression not pity, but a quiet resolve to stand by her side, no matter how fierce the storm outside. His loyalty was not born out of heroism or miracle but rooted in a deep, honest understanding of what it meant to be human, flawed, vulnerable, yet capable of unwavering support. In those moments of shared stillness, she felt a flicker of something new, a gentle awakening that even amid the fiercest external chaos, genuine human connection could be a refuge. His presence reminded her that she did not have to face everything alone, that loyalty could be a quiet, enduring act, not just a lofty ideal. Her heart, battered by the relentless judgments and accusations, began to soften just enough to hold on to this truth, that amidst the darkness, there was a flicker of steadfastness, a reminder that love's resilience often whispered in the smallest gestures. As the days stretched on, she found herself drawing strength from the simple act of his loyalty, an unspoken promise that, no matter what the world said or did, someone would remain nearby, listening, walking, staying. And in that steady, human support, she saw a seed of her own transformation sprouting, an understanding that her resilience could grow not from grand acts, but from the quiet, unwavering presence of those who refused to turn away. The dawn, fragile and distant, still waited, but in the quiet strength of loyalty, she began to believe that even the darkest night could give way to new light, born from the simple act of standing firm together. In the quiet hours that followed the storm of judgment and rejection, she began to notice small shifts within herself. The weight of shame, once so heavy it seemed to crush her spirit, gradually loosened its grip. The sun, though still distant and hesitant, peeked through the cracks of her broken world, casting gentle light onto her path. She found herself standing more often, not just sitting in despair, but moving, walking through the narrow lanes, feeling the rhythm of her steps anchor her to something deeper than the chaos outside. Her hands, once trembling with fear and uncertainty, began to rest more confidently on her belly, as if acknowledging the life growing within was a sacred flame igniting her purpose anew. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself to dream again, quietly, almost hesitantly. She remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell, tales of women who, despite all odds, found ways to bloom from the cracks of their broken hearts. She started to recall her own childhood dreams, of teaching children, of creating beauty from simple things, of inspiring others to find their own strength. These memories, once buried beneath layers of pain, now flickered like fragile candles in the darkness. She began to write, jotting down thoughts, sketching rough outlines of ideas, small acts of creation that felt like planting seeds of hope within her battered soul. She realized that her worth was no longer defined by the judgment of others or by the fragile support of those around her. It was rooted deep within her, in her resilience, her capacity to love and nurture, even when the world seemed intent on tearing her down. She began to see herself as more than a victim, a woman forging her own purpose, her own voice. Her smile, tentative at first, grew more genuine, revealing a quiet strength that was slowly emerging from the shadows. She understood that her healing was not linear. It was a slow unfolding, like a flower opening to the dawn after a long night. Teaching became her refuge. She started sharing stories with children in her community, simple tales of kindness, perseverance, and hope. Her voice, once trembling with doubt, gained confidence as she watched the children's eyes light up with curiosity and trust. She found joy in their innocence, their unfiltered belief that good could still prevail. With each story told, she wove a thread of resilience into their young hearts, and in doing so, she rediscovered her own strength. Her purpose blossomed quietly, rooted in the small acts of kindness that she could offer, teaching, creating, inspiring, each one a step toward healing her own wounded soul. In her moments of solitude, she would stand beneath the vast sky, feeling the gentle breeze brush against her face. She saw the stars shimmering faintly, distant yet constant witnesses to her journey. They reminded her that even in the darkness, light persisted, small, persistent, unyielding. Her heart, once heavy with despair, now beat with a new rhythm, one of hope, of renewal. She understood that her worth was not fragile or dependent on external validation but rooted in her own capacity to love, to dream, to create. The community's judgment still lingered in the background, but she no longer allowed it to define her. With each passing day, she grew more certain that her story was her own to tell. She was becoming a woman who could stand tall amid storms, whose purpose was no longer to seek rescue but to forge her own path. Her internal transformation was slow and delicate, like the first brush strokes of a painting, each one adding layers of depth and meaning. She knew that her journey was far from over, but now she carried within her a quiet confidence, a belief that even amidst the darkest nights, her light could still find a way to shine. And so she stood beneath the open sky, her gaze lifted to the horizon, whispering to herself that her story was still being written, one small act of courage, one quiet moment of hope at a time. With every heartbeat, she reaffirmed her worth, and in that affirmation, she found the courage to dream again, knowing that her purpose was no longer lost but reborn from within. The village square was alive with the hum of voices, children's laughter, and the gentle rustle of banners fluttering in the breeze. The day had arrived for the festival of renewal, a celebration of hope, resilience, and newfound unity. The air was thick with anticipation, yet beneath the surface, a quiet tension lingered, as if the entire community was holding its breath for what was to come. At the center of it all stood her, clothed in simple yet elegant fabric that caught the sunlight, her hands gently resting on her belly, her gaze steady but vulnerable. She had chosen this moment, the culmination of her journey, to step into the open, to confront her fears not in secrecy, but before her neighbors, her family, and herself. Her heart pounded fiercely, but her resolve was stronger. The village elders had asked her to speak, to share her story, not as a plea for sympathy, but as a testament to the courage of a woman who refused to be defined by shame or rejection. As she moved to the stage, a humble platform adorned with flowers and woven cloth, the crowd hushed, eyes fixed on her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of each gaze, the unspoken questions, the judgments she had once believed would crush her. And then, with a voice clear and unwavering, she began to speak. She recounted her pain, the betrayal, the rejection, the whispers, and how, through it all, she had found a quiet strength within herself. She spoke of her dreams for her child, of her desire to nurture life and hope amid despair. Her words carried a gentle but firm conviction. Her worth was not measured by the opinions of others, nor by the wealth or status of those who had turned away. She looked out at the faces of her community, some hardened with suspicion, others softened with understanding. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier as she continued. She told them that she had learned to see her own reflection differently, that her scars were not signs of shame but marks of resilience. She shared her vision of a future where love and compassion could replace judgment and exclusion. When she finished, a moment of silence fell, a pause filled with the weight of her words, the sincerity in her eyes. Then, slowly, from the crowd, a single voice rose, a voice not of condemnation, but of acknowledgement. Applause followed, tentative at first, then swelling into a chorus of claps and cheers. Faces that once looked away now looked at her with new respect, some with tears glistening in their eyes. Men and women stepped forward, offering words of support, their gestures simple but profound, an arm around her shoulder, a gentle nod, a smile that spoke of acceptance. The village square, once a battleground of shame, transformed into a stage of reconciliation. Her courage had broken the silence that had long kept her confined, and in doing so, she had begun to heal not only herself but the wounds of the community. The moment was poetic, like dawn breaking after a long, dark night, the promise that even the deepest pain could give way to hope. As she stood there, her heart swelling with quiet relief and a renewed sense of purpose, she realized that her story was no longer one of shame but of strength. Her journey, once marked by fear and rejection, was now a testament to resilience and truth. The community had witnessed her courage, her willingness to confront her fears openly, and in turn, they had begun to see her not as a fallen woman but as a woman who had refused to be broken. The festival continued around her, but inside she felt a calm certainty that love, like the dawn, rises slowly but surely, illuminating even the darkest corners of the soul. Her voice, once trembling with doubt, now carried the echoes of a new beginning. And as the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the village, she knew her story was just beginning, one of hope, of reconciliation, and of the unbreakable strength that comes from standing true to oneself. The community's acceptance was not just a moment of celebration, but a call to embrace truth, to hold on to hope, and to believe that even amid the storms, new life and new love could bloom. The gathering was quiet now, the air thick with unspoken words that had been long buried beneath layers of pride and pain. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, amber glow over the humble home where the family had come together, an unlikely assembly of past wounds and tentative hope. Her belly, rounded with life, was a gentle reminder of the future she clung to, even as shadows of doubt still lingered in some hearts. Among those present was her father, a man who had once looked at her with a mixture of shame and disappointment, his eyes hard and unforgiving during the darkest days. But now, as he stepped forward, his face was softened by the weight of regret, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out toward her. For a moment he hesitated, as if unsure whether his heart could still find the courage to forgive. Then, slowly, he knelt before her, voice thick with emotion. "I was blind," he whispered, eyes glistening with tears. "I saw only the shame, only what I thought the world would say. But I see now that I was wrong, so wrong." His voice cracked as he reached out to hold her hands, trembling but earnest. "My daughter, I have judged you unfairly. Your strength, your dignity, these are what truly matter. I am sorry for every harsh word, every look of disdain. I was afraid, but that fear has blinded me from seeing the truth of your heart." She looked down at him, tears threatening to spill from her eyes, but she held her composure, feeling the slow, steady tide of forgiveness washing over her. It was a long time coming, but it was finally here, an acknowledgement of her pain, her resilience, and her right to love and be loved. As her father's voice broke with emotion, her mother stepped quietly from the shadows, her face streaked with tears. She reached out, wrapping her arms around her daughter in a gentle embrace, whispering words of apology and love. "I was afraid too," she admitted softly. "Afraid of losing what little we had left, afraid of shame. But seeing you stand here today, so brave and so full of hope, has shown me what truly matters. It's not the judgments of others. It's the love that endures, the bond that survives even the darkest storms." Her words hung in the air, delicate yet powerful, as if weaving a new thread into the fabric of their fractured family. In that moment, forgiveness was no longer a distant hope but a tangible reality, a bridge built from tears, remorse, and understanding. The family, once torn apart by shame and fear, began to rediscover each other, slowly, with patience and humility. The father's eyes searched his daughter's face, and he saw her not as a fallen woman, but as a woman who had carried her burden with grace. Her mother's embrace whispered of unconditional love, of acceptance that transcended mistakes and judgments. The wind carried their words softly, like a lullaby of reconciliation, soothing the wounds that had festered for too long. As the twilight deepened, promises of a new beginning shimmered in their eyes. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they had taken the first step, acknowledging their faults, forgiving each other, and opening their hearts once more. The night settled gently around them, a silent witness to their redemption. And in the quiet stillness, a single thought bloomed, like a fragile flower emerging after a storm, that love, when nurtured with humility and truth, can heal even the deepest scars. The family's reunion was not just a moment of fleeting forgiveness, but a renewal of faith in each other's goodness and resilience. It was a testament to the power of humility, an invitation to hold on to hope, to listen with open hearts, and to believe that even the greatest wounds can be mended with patience and love. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, their light reminded everyone present that redemption is always possible, if we dare to forgive, to accept, and to dream of a future where love triumphs over fear. As the first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, the sky painted itself in hues of soft gold and blush, a gentle reminder that even after the stormiest nights, the world awakens anew. The village was silent, save for the subtle whispers of the wind through the trees and the distant song of a morning bird, a melody that seemed to carry the stories of resilience, hope, and reconciliation. The humble home where she stood, now bathed in the tender glow of sunrise, reflected a quiet strength that no storm could diminish. Her silhouette was steady against the awakening sky, a symbol of a journey long fought for, a testament that love, at its core, isn't about magic or salvation, but about the unbreakable human spirit that refuses to be left alone in darkness. The stars above shimmered softly, whispering secrets of the universe, reminding us that even in the vastness of night, we are never truly isolated. Each star, a tiny beacon of hope, mirrors the small yet powerful light within each of us, the light that persists through pain, rejection, and doubt. That light is what carried her through the shadows, what brought her to this moment of peace. And as the sun rose higher, spilling its warmth across the land, it seemed to affirm that healing isn't a sudden miracle, but a slow unfolding, a dawn that patiently dispels the darkness. Nature's quiet symphony, rustling leaves, the distant hum of life awakening, becomes a gentle chorus, echoing the core truth that no one is truly alone. In the stillness, in the soft unfolding of a new day, lies a profound message. Love is not a magical fix, but a proof that even in our most fragile moments, we are woven into a larger tapestry of life and connection. It's in the quiet acceptance of ourselves and others, in the forgiving embrace of the dawn, that we find the strength to move forward, step by step, into the light. So, let us carry this story forward. Let it remind us that every wound, every rejection, and every tear can be transformed into a seed of hope, if we choose to nurture it with patience, courage, and compassion. Love is not a fairy tale, but a testament to our resilience, a quiet affirmation that we are never truly alone in our journey. When we open our hearts and stand tall amid the silence of the early morning, we discover that even the smallest act of courage can bloom into a new beginning. As you walk away from this story, remember that your own light matters, no matter how faint it may seem in the dark. Like the stars that whisper in the night, your presence is a vital part of the universe's ongoing symphony of hope. Share this story, like the dawn sharing its promise to the world. Subscribe to keep the light alive in your heart, and in the stories you hold close. Let love be your quiet strength, your daily reminder that no one is truly alone, that even in our moments of deepest shadow, the promise of sunrise patiently waits. As the sky brightens and the world awakens, carry this truth with you. Love is the slow, steady sunrise within us all, illuminating the path ahead. And it is in that gentle, persistent light that hope blooms eternal.